This is one of my favorite games of all time. Mansions of Madness. I've probably spent more hours on this board game than any other board game I've ever played. It's a horror exploration game that's steeped in Lovecraftian themes, and it really made me gain appreciation for cosmic horror. Themes of dread, darkness, and despair translate really well in this game, but will it translate well in food? Let's venture into the dark culinary arts by opening up the Necro Nom Nom Nom. The Necro Nom 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 by Mike Slater is a Lovecraft-inspired cookbook that is pretty much a parody of the Necronomicon, a fictional evil and ancient grimoire that appears in several of H.P. Lovecraft's stories. Also known as the Book of the Dead, the Necronomicon holds powerful spells that summons horrific ancient creatures. But hopefully with the Necro Nom Nom Nom, we're going to be raising our cooking skills and summoning amazing flavors instead. I've been wanting to do this cookbook for a while now, since in my Patreon poll on what cookbook to do next, this got the most votes. Admittedly, the sample size is really small, but hey, a win's a win. By the way, shout out to my patrons for helping me make these videos. I can't thank you guys enough for your support. Y'all rock. This is, hands down, the prettiest looking cookbook I've ever seen by far. The cover is embossed with ornate patterns, and the shiny foil stamp that highlights the gold accents looks absolutely stunning. It really feels like you're holding something truly epic, which is super fitting for the theme. This might be the coolest cover I've ever seen among not just cookbooks, but all books in general. The design and stylistic approach to this cookbook is just outstanding. They've done a great job making it feel like an ancient tome. The background of each page looks like old faded paper, and each recipe is accompanied by beautiful sketches and what looks like handwritten scribbles and notes. I can't praise it enough for how immersive it feels, as it truly feels like you're reading the Necronomicon. You'll also notice that all of the food images in this cookbook are all illustrations. While I'm a big fan of photos in cookbooks, I can see why they went with sketches instead. After all, you won't find any high-res, full-color JPEGs in the actual Necronomicon, will you? The sketches are really well drawn, and the accompanying notes makes for some really interesting reading. So I really like how the images are on theme, but it does cause an issue which I'll get to in a bit. First, I want to highlight the recipes themselves. This isn't your traditional common cookbook that simply lists the ingredients, cooking info, and recipe steps. No. Just like the Necronomicon, this Necro Nom 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 is written as if it was an ancient grimoire that is meant to be mysterious and must be studied and deciphered. Take this crab cake recipe, for example. One of the steps tells you, shape in the old way into 8 discs and place upon the prepared altar. Cast them into the darkness and cold for 1/12 of one of your numbered days. Which translates to shape into 8 discs and place on baking sheet, refrigerate for 1 hour. Some of the ingredients are also renamed to make them sound more mystical or grotesque, so instead of ketchup, mustard, and barbecue sauce, it would be scarlet sauce, yellow spice, and sauce of barbecue. And some of the recipes even structure the steps as a story, kind of like reading a Lovecraftian tale. I love how the cookbook changes things up in its presentation, and I really appreciate its unique way of presenting recipes. Now yes, this can make cooking pretty tricky, as deciphering these instructions could get pretty frustrating, but fortunately the appendix section of the cookbook has all of the recipes listed in plain and simple, easy to read format with the correct labels for the ingredients and the recipe steps in plain English. When you're cooking, you'll probably be spending most of your time in these pages. They're super helpful, but there are still a few issues. I think the Necro Nom 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 is a bit tricky to use as a cookbook for 2 reasons. One is the lack of food photos. Again, I totally understand why it doesn't have any, but for me, food photos give you a good sense of what the end result is supposed to be. It gives you an idea of the colors, textures, and portions that I don't think sketches can fully capture. Some of the food sketches in the cookbook are also more abstract than others, so some guesswork is going to have to be involved. The second reason it's tricky to use is how the simplified appendix page recipes are tucked away at the back. Some of the recipes have visual instructions that help with assembly, so I found myself having to flip back and forth between the visual page and the recipe page, which is an added challenge, especially when your hands are occupied trying to juggle multiple things while cooking. So in order to implement its thematic gimmicks, the cookbook has to sacrifice a bit of ease and usability, which to me is okay and is well worth the Lovecraftian experience as a result. Now that we've talked about the book, it's time to put the Necronomnom to the test. I'm going to conjure up 3 kitchen spells to see the eldritch horrors that await us. Starting with an oyster dish inspired by one of the most significant locations in Lovecraft stories, a fictional New England fishing town known as Innsmouth. The recipe calls for Chesapeake Bay oysters, but the ones I found and am using are these ones from Costco, which are from Nova Scotia. I don't really know the difference between oyster types, but I'm hoping they're similar enough. I've never shucked an oyster before, but after some YouTube research, apparently you start by placing the oyster flat side up with a rounded side at the bottom. Then take your blade and stab it downward in the hinge of the oyster. When you're deep enough, twist the blade and you should be able to feel the shells pop open. Then you simply just cut straight along the top shell to sever the muscle that attaches the meat to the shell, remove the top shell, and then cut along the bottom to sever the bottom muscle. Your oyster meat should now be loose and good to go. Usually oyster shucking is done with a shucking knife, which is wider and sturdier, but since I don't do a lot of oyster shucking, I don't own a shucking knife, so I used the closest thing I had. It was working well, but it ended up being a noob mistake because the tip of my knife straight up snapped. Oyster shells are hella hard, so don't be an idiot like me. Use a shucking knife. Now we're gonna work on the toppings. In medium heat, add to your pan 2 cups of chopped spinach, 1 cup of chopped arugula, and 2 spring onions. I forgot to buy some spring onions, so I'm going to be using chives instead. 1 minced garlic clove, add a tablespoon of unsalted butter and saute everything until the spinach is wilted. Then add in 3 strips of cooked bacon chopped up, along with some lemon juice. The amount wasn't specified, so I just used the juice of a whole lemon. Also, the recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of hot sauce. I only had Tabasco, which I find to be hotter than something like Frank's Red Hot, so I'm halving mine to 1 tablespoon. When heated through, place the mixture on the oysters and then add in a 1/4 cup worth of grated Gruyere cheese and a 1/4 cup worth of grated Parmesan. Then cook it in the oven at 450 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 minutes, and that's the Innsmouth shuck. For our next horrific dish, I'm gonna recruit some help by summoning some cultists in robes, the Necronomnom's spooky take on pigs in a blanket. The recipe calls for 12 breakfast sausages. The cookbook has a pretty helpful diagram outlining the assembly steps. With a sharp knife, start cutting from the middle of the sausage and slice towards the end, rotate it 90 degrees and then slice from the middle again. That should leave you with 4 legs or tentacles to spread out. The cookbook suggests that you can cut the 4 legs further in half to make 8 legs, but I honestly don't know how that would work since the sausage meat and casing are already so soft and hard to cut. I actually had a really hard time cutting these legs because they kept falling apart, but I found that cutting them with kitchen shears works much better. I also think substituting breakfast sausages with hot dogs or cocktail wieners like the ones used in classic pigs in a blanket recipes would work better because they would be a lot easier to slice for the legs. Once you got your sausages cut and shaped, you're gonna need to open up a package of biscuit or croissant roll dough. I used 1 triangle of the croissant roll dough, ripped it in half and draped it around the cultists like so. Then use 2 toothpicks and stab them into each sausage in a cross shape. This is going to help keep the sausages upright in the oven while cooking. Place the cultists in the wells of a muffin pan or mold and then bake them in the oven at 375 degrees Fahrenheit for 13 minutes or until the dough is golden brown. Serve this with mustard, ketchup, or barbecue sauce for dipping, and you're ready to begin your tasty ritual with these sausage cultists and their doughy robes. Our last dish is based on the most recognizable creature in the Lovecraft mythos, Cthulhu, a colossal cosmic entity so terrible to behold that it destroys the sanity of those who encounter it. That's kind of how people describe Vegemite, so it's fitting that we'll be making a Vegemighty Cthulhu. This recipe is pretty simple. Start off with 2 slices of pumpernickel. The first step is to cut holes in the center of each slice in the shape of an eye. I tried to slice the shape with my knife, but the bread was falling apart and getting too crumbly, so I restarted, and instead of slicing the shape, I opted to just use cookie cutters to cut out simple circles for the eyes. That's where the egg is gonna go. Brush each slice with some unsalted butter and follow it up with some Vegemite. I couldn't find any Vegemite in my store, but I did find some Marmite instead. I've never had Vegemite or Marmite before, but I'm aware of their reputation as acquired tastes, so I'm really excited to try it for the first time. Some people think that they're vastly different, but some think that they're pretty identical. If you feel some type of way between the Vegemite versus Marmite debate, let me know in the comments. Place some butter in a pan over medium heat and then place the bread on the melted butter. Scatter some bean sprouts around the bread and stir them around occasionally. This is going to be Cthulhu's tentacle feelers. Add an egg into each hole of the bread to form the eyes and make sure the yolk doesn't break. Cook in medium heat for about 2 minutes, then the cookbook instructs to flip the bread and egg over to the other side and brush with more butter and Vegemite or Marmite, but I didn't have the courage to do that. I knew I would completely demolish this if I flipped it, so I just quit while I'm ahead and let it be. All that's left to do is plate the bread for the face and arrange the bean sprouts underneath. Add additional uncooked bean sprouts for the tentacle feelers and you'll soon be looking at the face of a great ancient power. So there it is, 3 dishes from the Necronomnomnon. Let's chow down and see if these cosmic culinary offerings are delicious or malicious. I begin my investigation in Innsmouth, a seafaring town once known for bountiful catches of fish. I decide to try the local aquatic delicacy and thoroughly enjoyed my meal before me. The sharp sensations of the lemon and hot sauce hit my taste buds like a bolt of lightning, and the combination of cheeses were the perfect contrasting comfort. The greens provided extra texture and herbaceousness, but the taste of the oyster is somewhat masked by the cacophony of flavors. Nonetheless, I enjoyed every bite of the Innsmouth shuck, and this dish proves to me that perhaps this town's odd reputation is not as bleak as it seems. As I enjoy my bountiful plate of oysters, I see a disturbing sight emerge from the shadows. Hooded figures with tentacle-like legs viciously impaled by sharp wooden stakes. The ghastly creatures chanting in unison, in a strange language I could not comprehend. Ketchup, mustard, barbecue. Ketchup, mustard, barbecue. I can feel the sinister tone of their incantation warping my mind, bringing to light an uncontrollable desire to consume meaty flesh. Unable to control my awakened beastly urges, I lunge at the cultists and engorge on their flesh. Their meat was cooked to perfection, but their doughy attire left much to be desired. I was expecting a buttery or flaky sensation, but alas, it was simply doughy. Perhaps another brand of cultist cloth or even a homemade creation would have been better. Their legs are also noticeably harder than the upper part of their bodies. Perhaps their appendages have crisped up more as they bake in the ceremonial fire. Although improvements can be made, I still enjoyed feasting on these cultists, especially as I dipped their delicious bodies in the liquids of their own ritual cauldrons. As I near the end of my gluttonous endeavor, one of the remaining cultists who survived my devastation lets out a faint, malevolent whisper. The ritual is complete. I then find myself plunged in darkness and suddenly face to face with true terror. I have met the gaze of Cthulhu. Whatever sanity I had left has forever vanished into the cosmos. My feeling of insatiable hunger was replaced with dreadful apprehension. Never was I a fan of pumpernickel, and I question my readiness for Marmite. I also find the idea of eating bean sprouts with egg and toast to be truly and utterly weird. I take a bite of this incomprehensible mixture, and millions of dark thoughts cross through the synapses of my mind, leading to one word to describe such ominous flavor. Ew. The Marmite was extremely salty, but not as bad as I feared. I imagine it being good to use as a cooking ingredient, but I have come to the conclusion that I don't like it on its own. The bean sprouts aren't helping. Perhaps alfalfa sprouts would have been the better alternative. And I still do not like pumpernickel. Did you know pumpernickel is named after the Germanic words pumpern and nickel, which translates to farting devil? Such thoughts are invading my mind, and I am descending deeper into madness. Final verdict for the Necronomnomnom cookbook. Love the theme, tricky to craft.